Now, I've heard a lot about the AfD, which is, I believe is basically stands for Alternative for Germany, but in the native tongue over there. I've heard many claims that the party is far right or whatever, or alt-right or racist or neo-Nazi or whatever. But I generally don't like to take the mainstream media's word for it when they say things like that, because sometimes they can be deceptive. You might make it be like, oh, you're racist if you're against immigration, for example, or whatever. They like to paint anti-globalism as something that is radically racist. So I do want to react to the leader of the AfD. I believe she is now the leader of the AfD. What she had to say herself about her various positions on multiple things, the election, the EU, Trump, energy, all that stuff. So I figured this would be a great way to introduce myself to the actual platform of the AfD rather than just taking, the mainstream media Wikipedia's word for it.
As the first ever chancellor candidate, for the AfD, what would the world expect from a Chancellor Weidel? What would be your top priorities?
Well, actually, I would like to correct something. I don't want to be impolite, but you just labeled our party as right-wing, which is not correct in my perspective. We are a libertarian conservative party in Germany. So we perceive ourselves standing in the middle and actually wanting to introduce sane and serious policies, because we see that this country is in need of real reforms. Let's have a look at Germany right now, where it stands. After 20 years, after 16 years of Angela Merkel, and after 3 years of the traffic light coalition, actually funny name, right, isn't it? Germany is not in a very good state. We have the highest energy prices worldwide. We are in the middle of a migration crisis. We got a million influx of immigrants, illegals, we don't know. Germany actually literally has no borders, no border control, nothing. So we have...
How is that true? It would be ridiculous if that was the literal thing. How? Germany is a country that has lasted for hundreds of years. I believe, I want to say. How in the world has Germany had no borders at all and no border control at all? I understand that, globalism is the hip new thing that you do to prove that you're not racist, but it wasn't always like that. And we all know full well that Germany was not always on board with that type of agenda either. So, I am very, very curious. I would be shocked if it was true that there were no borders at all and no border patrol. Now, maybe the border's not being enforced. That's an entirely different thing, though, than saying that there's literally no border at all. That's very dramatic. I'd be shocked if that was the case.
Criminal rates skyrocketing, and taxes are too high, so a middle-class taxpayers earning, let's say, 50,000 euros a year has to pay over half. So I think there's a lot of room of real policy making, lowering taxes.
Okay.
And then having also a serious energy policy. Germany is the only country having switched off nuclear power plants. So this country government has some...
Wait, that doesn't sound right. I read articles about some countries shutting off power plants. I don't think it was Germany, though. There was a wacko who was protesting a power plant, and he clung to one of the installations that prevented them from bulldozing it or whatever. I know the protester was arrested. Oh no, that was actually Germany. Never mind. I correct myself. That was actually Germany.
Imposed a obnoxious policy making, having a industrial country like Germany just being supported. Sorry, it's very important to have a status quo here. To have an industrial country like Germany, just being dependent on solar and wind power. And this is not serious, right?
So translate that into me for sort of top 3 policy initiatives that you would put in if you were Chancellor of Germany.
Border control, lowering taxes, and switching on the nuclear power plants.
And one of the other sort of things that I think...
Dude, I love this because like even Trump is concise to the point of being elementary, but even he is not as concise as Weidel was right there. You know, people like to be extremely verbose, especially in politics, and I'd love to have phrases and paragraphs for each of their policies. But I love that she literally was just like border control, lower taxes, nuclear power. Like having 2 words for each of the major policies that you want to enact is great, and it gives people a very clear vision of what it is that you actually want. Person kind of seems like a rock star right now, even though claiming that there's no border at all is a little wild. I'd be shocked if that was true. But other than that, I'm on board so far.
Border control, lowering taxes, and switching on the nuclear power plants.
And one of the other sort of things that I think sort of concerns many people within our audience, particularly the investor, business, and economist community, is this idea of withdrawing from the euro, of withdrawing from the EU, which would be seen by many in the mainstream, yes, as economically catastrophic for Germany. Many of the right-wing parties that have been successful in Germany have abandoned this initiative. You have not. Why?
We don't see that the European Union in its current state is an institution.
By the way, to be clear, she called herself a libertarian conservative. I don't think that this is a libertarian policy to switch from the euro to the I don't even know what they have, the Dutch dollar. This is, I would say, a nationalist position, right? So, you know, if they're calling the AfD alt-right or far right or whatever, you would see if they were indeed an alt-right or far right. And by the way, it's possible, I haven't made up my mind yet, that they are a far right or alt-right party. You would see nationalist policies. This is one of those types of nationalist policies where it's like, oh no, we're going to switch to our own currency. Right, versus Trump saying, "Oh, we're gonna have a Bitcoin reserve." Like going to something like Bitcoin would be more of a libertarian policy than switching to a federally controlled fiat currency, right? Like for example, New Hampshire, which is probably one of the most libertarian states in the United States of America, they recently voted in favor of having a Bitcoin reserve. I think that if she was truly a libertarian, she would be trying to run everything off of Bitcoin as well. We've seen even Javier Milei, which is literally he is the hallmark libertarian in power, and I think he switched his country to libertarian to Bitcoin as well. So I think this sort of betrays that maybe she's not a libertarian after all.
State is an institution that is working well. Right? So what we need to have is free trade among the European countries, but we don't need all the bureaucracy. So example, the European Commission, which is actually not voted, right? So you have a executive power like the Commission with also legislative power that is not elected. So this is a huge democratic deficit. So this Commission decided just to forbid diesel and benzene, like all the traditional fossil motor, right? So what happened?
I'm sorry, when she asked about the currency, let me go back. I know it's a minute. I do want to go back to make sure I didn't miss anything. But she was asked about the currency. She's talking about diesel.
In its current state is an institution that is working well. Right? So what we need to have is free trade among the European countries, but we don't need all the bureaucracy. So example.
Okay, I do want to knock her on this point because if she wants free trade, it's important or at least helpful to have a common currency with which to trade with those other countries. That's why I think Javier Milei in Argentina supports free trade, and switching to Bitcoin is an international currency. So, that doesn't hurt things. If you want to be international currency, switching to the pound or the US dollar is the way to go, right? We don't need a million, billion, trillion currencies from all these itty bitty, teeny tiny countries flooding into the market. Then you've got as inflation increases and decreases, you've got all these crazy stuff going on with Forex and, changing and fluctuating currency values, wildly changing the prices of products as you buy them, both importing and exporting. It's just not helpful. If you want to have free trade, I actually don't think that switching away from the euro is what you want to do. I'm really not seeing the connection there between supporting free trade and leaving the EU.
The European Commission, which is actually not voted, right? So you have a executive power like the Commission with also legislative power that is not elected. So this is a huge democratic deficit. So this Commission decided just to forbid diesel and benzene, like all the traditional fossil motor, right?
And I agree that this is an issue, but that's not addressing the currency problem, right? Unless you're talking about a form of government and saying, I don't like that they were able to unilaterally do stuff like this. We need to be able to set our own policy. But again, the question isn't about how you set the policy. It's about the policy itself. I think she's sort of dancing around the question here.
So what happens is that they actually ripped off the German automotive sector, and this is also, in my perspective, something. It's something like a socialist policy making, that you destroy the market mechanism within Europe. And that's the reason why we say, look, we don't need a commission that is actually destroying the foundation of our continent. What we need is free trade among the European countries.
Many people are critical of the EU on many of the points that you make here, but very few are making the case for withdrawal from the EU, and specifically...
Thank you. This dude is on it, right? Because it's he asked the question and she avoided it. I love how he brought everything back, because I completely agree with her on the issues that she's talking about, but she didn't answer the question that she was asked. And again, I just don't see how that connects to the policy of free trade to move away from a common currency that so many other countries use.
And what we need is free trade among the European countries.
Many people are critical of the EU on many of the points that you make here, but very few are making the case for withdrawal from the EU. And specifically on the euro, how do you envision that happening? Was it a return in Germany to the Deutsche Mark? Is it then, explain to us the mechanics of how you imagine that working if you had your way.
Well, this is...
I would like to see a why. I have no idea why she wants to do this.
The entire the entire discussion around the Dexit, right? Yeah. So we think that the European treaties need to be reformed, so that...
He asked about the currency. She starts talking about treaties. Excuse me, ma'am. Is there something about this policy you don't want to tell us? It is quite suspect that she has been asked twice about why she wants to move away from the euro to the Deutschmark, and she has refused to answer the question directly. Maybe he'll ask it a third time, but I'm not seeing a likelihood that she'll ever answer this question. And if she's not answering this question here, where is she answering this question? And why is she refusing to answer this question? What is it that she has to hide about her policy, or does she just not have a defense for it? Does she have an ulterior motive there? This is a massive red flag for me, right? That she is so afraid to answer this question. Now, her clarity on some earlier questions was appreciated, and I did a little bit of applauding there, but it is a really big red flag that she is dancing away from this question when, especially apparently, it's a major part of her platform. Why would you have a policy in your platform that you're so ashamed of? It makes no sense. I don't understand it, but I'll hit play. I'll rewind to let him ask the question again. I'll hit play. Maybe she ends up getting around to answering the question. But he asked about a currency. I don't know why she's saying anything about treaties.
How do you envision that happening? Was it a return in Germany to the Deutschmark? Is it then, explain to us the mechanics of how you imagine that working if you had your way.
Well, this is the entire discussion around the Dexit, right? Yeah. So we think that the European treaties need to be reformed so that every country within the European Union has a right, first of all, to have a veto against the Commission. For instance, that the German government could say, okay, we don't agree, we say no. Mm-hmm. So the veto power in the European treaties. And if a country wants to leave the European Union, why not falling automatically into a free trade zone? I highly recommend just a free trade zone because all the bureaucrats, thousands of them, like eating up taxpayers' money, they just disturb real competition among the European countries. We don't need all of these bureaucrats that have actually who have no clue what they're doing and destroying our foundation in the European Union. Look at the German car market, for instance.
But of course, this was also the Brexit dream, and that is a dream that I think by most accounts has not really materialized for the United Kingdom, and in fact now trying to restrike trade deals with Europe.
The reasons for that? The reason is very simple. Actually, they used the Brexit. The European Union used the Brexit to actually exclude Great Britain from the European market. That was actually
that's
almost
part of the arrangement.
No, but you cannot do that. You cannot do that. This is not competition. This is no.
Hold on. She's saying you cannot do that, but they literally did that. So she's saying, "Oh well, Europe is mean for treating Britain so poorly," which, to be fair, yes, she is right. Europe was being mean to Britain for doing that because they were part of Brexit. But does she not have a contingency plan in case the European Union does the same thing to Germany, or to prevent the European Union from doing the same thing to Germany? I was on board with some of her policies that she had, but I'm questioning her logic and train of thought here because she's getting into some very questionable places, in my opinion.
No market competition. What we need to have is a free zone, and someone who decides, actually, I have something against, like Cameron did. Yeah. He said, look, I don't agree with open border policies. I don't agree with your policies at all. So please reform yourself. And if they don't move, it is his right as a sovereign state just to step back and say, look, we step out. But then a country should automatically fall in a free trade zone.
Right, but
the point of the interviewer, I don't know what his name is, but I appreciate his humility for not bringing it up, is that this was done, right? And the result of what happened in Britain is what's going on in Britain. I think there were some economic difficulties and stuff. She is complaining about what the EU did. But I don't know if she's having the clarity of mind to be like, well, they are about to do the same thing to us if we go through with my plan. It's almost like she's a walking billboard for the opposite of her position and policy on this.
Should and do are sort of sometimes different. On the issue of the United States and Donald Trump.
No, it is nonsensical. It is nonsensical because the European Union in this current state is not democratic. first of all. And secondly, you have no real competition.
And may I ask your perspective on the election in the United States,
Yes,
the
sure.
relationship with Donald Trump and Germany, who maybe shares some of the same views, particularly on immigration, but also in a sort of very nationalist view of things, would be very damaging economically for Germany. How do you imagine that relationship? How damaging do you think that could be to Germany? How does it change your view of the United States as very critical over its influence over Germany and Europe?
Which American policies under Trump are going to hurt Germany? I'm a bit confused on that.
Well, first of all, when I saw the elections in the US, I almost had physical pain how Donald Trump and his family was disparaged by the mainstream media. So I really had physical pain.
Dude, first like Marjorie Taylor Greene and now Alice Weidel. Trump has so many simps. It's fascinating
to see that, like how unfairly he was treated by the mainstream media. So I have to be very frank. I actually put my thumbs up for Donald Trump. We have huge hopes with in his presidency, and I really hope that he puts an end on this terrible war in the Ukraine, because the European member states are actually not willing or capable of doing something like that. So we have to tell the truth that we are not capable anymore. I think, because you asked me on trade policies, I think that gambling with tariffs and actually imposing them effectively is a huge difference.
True.
And having a look on our car makers, for instance, because German policymakers, they always say...
the cars, right. Big blind spot for me. I should have thought of that.
Because German policymakers, they always say, okay, German car makers might be hit very hardly by tariffs, but they're already there with their plans. BMW, Mercedes, Volkswagen, they have almost, I think, 25,000 employees in the US. Mm-hmm. So the firms, the companies, the German companies, they are already in the US. And do you know why? Because of high energy prices here in Germany. So the policies...
Wait, but she wants to decrease energy prices in Germany. So under her vision, you would probably trigger those tariffs getting into effect, right? Because, they would start hiring more people in Germany. Cost is cheaper, so you start making more stuff in Germany. That decreases the amount of Americans that are working in those factories, and then that would trigger the tariffs ostensibly. So she's saying that there's a difference between threatening to have the tariffs and putting the tariffs in place, but everything that she wants to do will lead to those tariffs getting triggered. You've got two nationalists fighting. Well, I don't know how much Trump is a nationalist. He's a nationalist to a degree. I don't know if he's a full-blown nationalist, but you've got two semi-nationalists fighting over control of these companies that exist in one of these countries, right? Trump is trying to exert influence over BMW and Mercedes, right? Something has to give. One side has to win. This is a zero-sum game if you play games like this, right? Trying to exert your authority in this way. So I think it's hard for me to see this going in a way that benefits Germany more than it benefits America.
Here in Germany. So the policies, these obnoxious policies being imposed on German companies by our own policymakers actually led them to build plants in the US and abroad, because here they cannot produce anything anymore on a competitive level.
And another question, that you had your co-chair out this weekend talking about NATO and the relationship of Germany to NATO, saying that basically Germany should consider leaving NATO in its current arrangement. Is that a position that you agree with, and on what basis?
Well, this is not exactly what he said. He said that we need to strengthen the European pillar within the NATO. What does it mean? Well, our security interests are pretty much different from the US within the NATO. And I think, in my opinion, that the Europeans should put their act together, doing more within the NATO. Germany, for instance, never have been paying 2% of GDP at all. So therefore, Donald Trump is perfectly right. So we need to contribute to NATO. But it's also in our responsibility to formulate our national interests, because our national interest is quite different from the US. And it's very simple why. The US is very far away, and here in Europe we have this war in front of our doors. So our security interest is completely different.
Do you see Germany's interests as more aligned with Russia's interests than with the interests of the United States?
Well, absolutely not. Absolutely not. I think Germany should have taken a more diplomatic part, but Germany failed in doing so. And I think that Donald Trump is really capable to sit together with Russian diplomats, with Putin, to formulate a freedom treaty, because what we need is freedom, because otherwise I'm in fear, to be honest, that this conflict, this terrible war, may escalate.
And on the question also of Ukraine, you've also talked about sort of reconnecting with Russia, reconnecting Russian gas, basically going back to the old German model of lower cheap Russian gas coming in to support industry. Why are you so confident in being so dependent on Vladimir Putin, particularly in light of what we saw over the last few years? Why are you so confident to hand that dependency to Russia, rather than with people that you have potentially a longer track record with of a cooperative relationship and a more diversified source of energy?
Is he saying they should be bringing in oil from, let's say, America, for example? I think the tricky thing is, geographically, I want to say Russia is closer to Germany. It would explain why they bring in oil from Germany, from Russia, because it's like, you know, if you're close, you know, you're right next door, why not make a deal rather than having to build these lengthy underwater pipelines that may not get busted occasionally here and there by submarines or whatever, or whales or animals or sharks and stuff like that. It's convenient. Maybe it doesn't fit with your principles of, Putin bad, right? Which is true, by the way. But maybe you don't want to put yourself into the thumb of Putin, but it makes sense to use oil that is near you. Now, maybe she may want to try and get oil from America or whatever. That'd be cool. I'd be down. That'd be based. But it maximizes efficiency to get oil from the nation that's closest to you.
Well, being dependent on Russian gas, you should really ask this question Angela Merkel, because
It's a policy you're advocating as well.
No. Wait. We want to have cheap energy and secure energy in Germany. This is what I stand for, and this is my humble opinion. This would be the right policy, and the energy market is highly disturbed in Germany. We are the only industrial country having switched off nuclear power plants. You have to imagine this, right? So what we need to do is going back to cheap and secure energy support. Otherwise, our entire companies get bankrupt or they go abroad.
So is she saying that we don't need gas at all, just do nuclear? Bold take. Interesting. Not on board personally, because I do think that diversifying your energy sources is a good, smart thing, because if something goes wrong with one of your energy sources, you've got energy from the other source that you can keep on drawing from. Interesting take. I didn't hear her deny that she wants to get energy from Russia, though. She said, go talk to Angela Merkel about the policy that I support. Doesn't make any sense to me. If you support Angela Merkel's policy, you might as well say why. Right? You know, that's like saying, oh, hey, not a newbie. You voting for Trump? I'm like, yes, sir-y, I am. And the person's like, oh, wait, why are you voting for Trump? Why are you voting for Trump? Why do you want to enact the policies that he wants to support? And I'm like, oh, well, you got to ask him why he wants those policies, but I support them. Like, I honestly think that Alice Weidel is bombing this interview.
Our entire companies get bankrupt or they go abroad. Like thousands of people sit on the streets because the German companies actually go abroad. They go to the US, they go to China, they go to the neighboring countries because we cannot guarantee energy support anymore. So we need nuclear, we need gas, and we also need coal. All of this, like the solar and wind power plants.
Is she reading off of a note card? Is she like doing talking points? Because he didn't say anything about wind power. He didn't say anything about solar. He didn't even mention coal. He's talking about importing gas from Germany. That's what he's talking about. Why is she going off on tangents about things that are completely unrelated? Well, not completely unrelated. They're tangentially related, but they're not related directly. So it's still not not related in a way that is useful.
Wind power plants, you cannot do this in Germany. It's not possible. And you don't need to be a very smart person, actually, to come to this conclusion. This is a funny thing, actually.
On the sort of question of European politics, again, sort of having seen some of the other far-right parties, or you dispute that categorization.
Absolutely.
But some of the parties that say some of the similar things, they have gone more to the center. We think of Le Pen in France, we think of Meloni in Italy. Is that something, an outline, a blueprint that the AfD is willing to follow in order to gain real influence in the German political debate? Or do you think that they have basically sold out?
Well, once again, in Germany, or the label far right is being labeled on people or party, like when people go to work, they earn money, they want to have border control. People who want their children to have a very good education, they're all labeled as right-wing. So I don't understand this label. I just suggest everyone to read our program, first of all. And yeah, we are a conservative, libertarian party. And what we want to have is, we want to have a future for the next generation here. And we don't want to have this chaotic politics.
You've got to be joking. What is this? She said, he said, what do you think of the other far right or alt-right parties? And she said, we want a future for our generation and border control. Oh my goodness. She should be playing dodgeball. She shouldn't be a politician the way that she's bobbing and weaving from everything that's getting thrown in her direction. She answered like the first 2 or 3 questions and then gave up. Like, bruh, what is this?
Future for the next generation here, and we don't want to have this chaotic politics being imposed on the people. And if you have a look on the Christ Democratic Party, Friedrich Merz, it's a leftist socialist party already. So Chancellor Merkel is the first green chancellor Germany had. She ruined our country. She destroyed our backbone. And this is the responsibility of the CDU, of socialist policymaking.
That is that's a horrible interview. A horrible interview. I'm going to read some of these comments and see if they picked up that she did not really answer many of these questions. When Mrs. Weidel this is from Wallwatts, it says, when Mrs. Weidel is interviewed by a German TV station, they always try to expose her to defame her to give her opportunity to elaborate on her thoughts. That is much better in this case. I mean, true. for me as German, it is the first time I see Alice doing an interview in English. I'm impressed by this comment section here. All the non-German people asking honest and serious questions, trying to understand why this woman is considered evil in German public media, whereas Germans here trying to convince people that she's a Nazi without having real arguments. I mean, to be fair, she sounds like she's anti-immigration, and for many people, they view anti-globalism as racism, and of course, racism is alt-right or being neo-Nazi-ish. So I can understand why, anyone who's anti-immigration is getting painted as an alt-righter. Or a neo-Nazi. So I don't entirely blame them for that if that's the position that she holds. No one is pointing out that she didn't answer many of these questions. I am shocked. Did they watch this whole interview? This is a rather lengthy comment. I guess I'll read this. Says here, a German immigrant background living in Germany. I have a PhD in nuclear engineering from Aachen in Germany, so I'm skeptical, to say the least, on how easy it will be to just switch on the nuclear power plants. That's true. Many of them are getting demolished, which makes it more difficult for them to be turned on. There are some power plants that I think could be enabled, but they're getting demolished, so it's like you can't really turn those on at that point. Since the last 3 nuclear power plants were switched off in April 23rd, and most of the existing ones are in a state of dismantlement. Germany could start with ramping up import of nuclear energy from neighboring countries and work on policies and investment to restart the nuclear power plants, but it depends on how ready the existing ones are. I do resonate with her on the need for border control and lowering of taxes, which she has no real solutions of. I mean, it's not... What kind of statement is that? I don't think it takes a brain surgeon to figure out how to reduce taxes. And I don't think it takes a brain surgeon to figure out how to control the border. You could just put troops on the border or whatever. If you need more physical barriers, you build them. How hard can that be? I mean, I guess people can make it hard for them, but that's not a complicated solution. The current government broke down since they were unwilling to increase their fiscal deficit. It would be interesting to see her ghost policies on how she plans to invest millions of euros in border control and at the same time lowering taxes, not to forget about the absolutely dismal state of public infrastructure like healthcare. They didn't even talk about healthcare here. I'm surprised because of fiscal policies. That's one of the major things that people like to talk about and hit on. My biggest issue with her is that she calls herself moderate libertarian conservative group. While some of her policies do sound moderately conservative, her party itself is far from so. The AfD has, this is an interesting point. The AfD has profoundly neo-Nazi factions who undermine democracy and human rights, and she is the head of that party. Okay. I have a point to make, but I do want to hear what he has to say for the rest of this. At best, she is a populist leader, hiding her and her party's real intentions before being elected. At least in 1933, when Adolf Hitler was elected, he had already written extensively about his plans for Europe. Here we know again what we are heading towards. I guess time to abandon a sinking ship. Now, he makes a good point here. For the AfD, being a neo-Nazi party, I think I've actually heard stuff about members of the AfD saying racist things. It's actually why I watched this video, because if she is the head of the party, she should be carrying the banner of what the party stands for. That's like my whole point in listening to what she had to say. Now, if she's hiding the true motives of the AfD, that certainly is one thing. I don't know if that's true. I'm not German. I don't know the inner workings of German politics. But I was hoping that she would be showing off and portraying the true values of the AfD party. It was an interesting interview, to say the least. I am a little bit nonplussed in her ability to answer some of the questions. Now, maybe it's because English is not her primary language, but still, she was asked some very direct questions and she refused to answer them. So that, to me, has me extremely nonplussed on Alice Weidel as well as the AfD, because if you can't answer very, very simple questions such as how are you going to approach tariffs, or how are you going to move from the away from the European dollar to your own national homegrown currency, then I don't know why I should think that your answers of, low taxes, cheap energy, and border control should be enough to make make me forgive you of those failings. Like, you've got to have an answer for all those other policies, because you have to have at least sound reasoning for your policies on more than just 3 political issues. You just have to.